big.
Exactly. And it is quite good that you mentioned the issue of education, because coming from the United Nations standard, Nigeria is failing to meet up to 27% of budget allocation to education. But let's still focus on this budget deficit management and the rise in government borrowing. What do you have to say about that? Okay, but before then, don't forget you can join us through our social media platforms. We have Princewill, Ezeikwu right here with us. But after this break, we will come back. You will be answering some questions on budget deficit and borrowing in the country. Do stay with us. All right, welcome back. It's the Moneyline with Nancy, and we have Princewill Eziukwu, a chartered accountant and also a specialist in the financial sector. Well, he was about answering the question on budget deficit and also the government borrowing as well. So you can continue from that. Sir.
Okay, Afri Invest, of course we know Afri Invest. They did a report, I think yesterday. In that their report, they said if care is not taken, that the debt. The deficit financing in the 2018 budget might hit 4-point-something trillion. When I saw that report, I was perturbed. The reason is, if you look at the debt profile in Nigeria, which I've said time without number, people keep saying that if you look at our GDP, you look at our debt profile, that Nigeria is still within the sustainability level in debt financing.
Debt financing.
Yeah. So, of course, I beg also to disagree that if you look at our revenue, because you pay debt with revenue, you don't pay debt with GDP. If you look at our revenue now vis-a-vis our population and then the GDP, you see that we are not really doing enough. Okay, the 2018 budget, you look at how much was planned to be financed from oil and gas. Now, other domestic resource mobilization like company income tax, VAT, and all the rest.
Value added tax.
So, I think we need to avoid as much as possible debt this time around. There is, if you take a proper look in the world today, development and emerging economies, there is this increase in debt. Of course, in the world, there is this increase in debt profiles. Now, countries are getting encumbered so much with debt. Now, something is going to happen. A time we'll get to a time, I think in no distant time, when certain countries that do not have that buffer will find it difficult paying debts. Now, debts on their own, they are good. You can actually get a productive debt. A debt that you can use to invest in a revenue-generating instrument or asset, which will pay back that debt.
On its own.
So it's good. Now, but any debt that will not be able, that the revenue from such a debt will not be able to offset the interest and principal of that debt, is not actually a good debt. What do I mean? Of course, the government is not only a profit making enterprise. Of course, sometimes we look at social cohesion, we look at the social benefits that can actually, come, and also the synergetic effect of government investment. Okay, having said those ones, they are good, you take loan, but the way, if I am opportuned to be in a conference or in a room where policies are made on debt. I think at this point in time, we need to slow down on debt, whether foreign or domestic.
Or domestic.
How? So what do I now suggest the way that the government will run? There are some of these organizations that are revenue generating sectors in Nigeria. The federal government of Nigeria should critically look at the operations and make them profitable. So to me, I wouldn't want the government to keep borrowing.
To look in what?
Looking what? Domestic resource mobilization.
Let's move, because the indicators are quite, the number of them. Exactly. Let's move now to the aspect of inflation rate. 9.98% being proposed for 2019. And currently we are doing over 11%, 11.28 in inflation rate. And moving into an election year, we are saying that the inflation rate will drop.
The economic recovery and growth plan, you know, even when we were doing that, when inflation was around 19%, you know, the benchmark was around 12% or thereabouts, which they succeeded at least by fixing the NPR at 14%, the cash reserve ratio at 22.5%, and then the liquidity ratio, I think, around 30%. So the government was able to, and then they maintained that there was this stability. So that stability pushed, you know, continued to mount pressure on the inflation. So the inflation was actually falling. Yeah. But I have some concern, I have a little concern on that 9%. One, currently we are doing about 11.5%. We experienced flooding in Nigeria, which affected a whole lot of... And
we are still here to get the actual data on that.
Exactly.
On the
so we experienced that flooding affected a whole lot of arable lands and the crops. So we are going to experience, definitely, it will reduce the supply of foods and food items in the market. So, of course, and also remember, we are entering into an election year. There will be so much money that before now not in circulation. So that will be pulled into the economy. So exactly. Now pushing in more money into the economy with less food to purchase. So that, of course, will be a pressure. We mount more pressure on the economy, on the inflation itself. So to me, I wouldn't say it's not realistic. I wouldn't just give that blanket statement that it's not realistic. But let's just watch and see how it... But for me, I think a 10% could have been better.
No, but 9.98 is 10.
Yeah.
So
approximately 10. So to me, it's achievable. Okay. But...
With some of these things you've listed.
Yes, exactly. So,
likelihood.
And another thing is if going forward, the MPC, when they will be meeting at sometime in December, increases the rates. So when they tighten more and then expand more on these CBN initiatives of giving SMEs loans, I think it will also go a long way in putting inflation in check.
Okay, sorry, still going back to the issue of budget. As you have said, that budget is the fiscal thing that the citizens will always know that the government is working. Do you see Nigeria going back to January-December budget cycle?
January to December?
Yes.
It takes a whole lot of discipline. Why do I say that? It's possible. It's possible.
You bear in mind what we have on ground.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at, first and foremost, by next week, or maybe first week or second week in November, they will actually submit the budget to the National Assembly.
Then?
Now, the National Assembly will call members, will call the parastatals, ministries to come and defend it. Now, if they defend on time, and then they move it, and we don't have much material differences between the National Assembly and the presidency, I think it's possible. But can I beat my checks? January 1, I don't.
No. It is still part of the process, because at the end of the day, we see trade blames. Yeah. The legislative will blame the MDAs for not coming on time to defend their budgets. MDAs will blame the legislative, and the executive too will blame the legislative.
Exactly.
So
there's always a lot of drama coming up with the budget.
So what I'm trying to say is that within the timeline is doable. But at least with the past 3-4 years experience, if we use that to form a trend, of course, definitely, I wouldn't bet on it.
All right, let's discuss the issue of the non-oil and oil revenues for the 2019. We're looking at oil projections 3.6 trillion naira 2019. Non-oil projection 1.34 trillion naira. Oil projection at the amount 3.6, and the fact that we're saying that we're diversifying.
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts? Yeah,
we are diversifying, but we've not started experiencing the positive effect of diversification. At least it's not reflecting on the budget revenue. Paper.
Yeah, exactly.
So, to me, I feel that budget, to a large extent, contradicted all the things the government have been saying.
So that means they also still have so much trust or
oil. Yeah, when I looked at, first and foremost, look at the baseline, the oil baseline they use, $60.
$60.
So I pray the National Assembly doesn't increase it to 65. I was actually expecting the presidency to say 55. Use 55 as the benchmark. Now you can go ahead and use your 2.4 million daily production. Then let's leave it to the National Assembly to move to $60 per barrel. So what happened is that definitely the last year, remember it was 51. Now plus 2.3 million. So, but this year 60, that is extra $10. Then 2.4. That's extra 100 million barrels per day. So we are really, this time around, over-dependent. Also remember that the budget volume actually fell. Remember also that the baseline, the dollar-naira exchange rate also are still reduced at 306. So what am I trying to say in essence? We are really over-dependent on oil and gas,
can it even be achieved? The current projection for production. So do we even always get there? Right now we're having a little bit of ease.
2.1.
Yeah, but are we going to be able to achieve this? So at least
we keep pampering the Niger Delta. We keep pampering. I use the word pampering them. Making sure that it's relative peace in the Niger Delta. Then the production side, we can hit the target. Then of course the price element is an exogenous factor. We do not have control over it. So we keep praying. Now, but do we really need to leave our economic circumstances to just mere prayers? That is now another question. So we do not have control. How much are we generating inward? So that means we are not really thinking.
Talking about generating inward, 2019 company income tax was estimated at 799.5 billion naira. Yes. Value added tax at 222.3 billion. Federation account levy, NNPC to generate 955.3 billion. We are generating enough money, don't you think so?
We are generating enough, and how much is our budget? If we are generating enough, how much are we borrowing to finance the same budget?
The same budget.
That means we are not generating enough. See, my problem is, earlier this year, I made the statement that if all these revenue generating units in government, we can actually ensure they are prudent in the management of the finances. Go to NNPC. You see the figures coming out emanating from there. So if we are prudent, only jump, you know what happened. So imagine NECO and all the rest of them. So I feel we can generate more from some of these organizations. If we generate more, we can to a large extent reduce the deficit financing element of that budget. But up until, provided we still leave this parastatals, these agencies, these revenue generating agents of government, to keep doing whatever they want, it will not reflect into the Nigerian budget. Hence reflecting into the Nigerian economy.
Although the government will not totally agree with you with the TSA and all of those things, but we know that there are still some of these monies that are not accounted for. Now let's look at the exchange rate, 305 to the dollar. That's what you call official, but you know that the average man, most of the time, if you are not importing or you are not applying and waiting for several weeks, you want to go to the black market, you know that figure is definitely not it. Now with what you call dollarization, because we are going to see it. 2019 elections, people will come out, the issue of vote buying and the issue of spending money, for campaigns and all of those things. How do you see the exchange rate? Don't we expect to see some of the things that, the rates, are naira, having so many challenges?
Okay, let me say this. If you are looking at it from the angle of politicians buying vote with dollar, that means they are pulling in more dollar into the economy. Now, but the question is, where do they get the dollar? That is one thing we need to trace, because for you to understand an issue, you need to understand the origin. So if they are going out there to buy dollar, definitely it's going to mount a whole lot of pressure on the naira.
Yes.
So which will make the naira to fall. Right? So, but if there is this somewhere else, they actually get this dollar into the economy. So it's going to mount a pressure, serious pressure on dollar, because there will be more dollar in supply than naira. But
the issue of dollar is more money, there's more control in terms of the dollar. So definitely it's going to be naira pursuing.
So we just need to, and I think that is why it's actually left to the policymakers to come up with strategies on how to make sure that they track. There is need for us to track, keep tab on the finance and then dollar.